like to call this meeting back to order. And we will begin with, under item number 9, information. Item D, equity, diversity, and inclusion, Appendix S. Dr. Smith.
Yes, thank you, and good evening. I wanted to provide the board and the community as well with an update on the work that we've done in the district. As you may recall, we presented an initial articulated scope of work in March of 2019. And this is just to provide you with where we are in that process. I've placed the information in more of a document form than the previous slide presentations that I've done, because we want to be able to share this publicly with the community once the board has had a chance to review. So I won't read all of this to you, of course, but if you just follow along the highlighted items, the first being the implicit bias training for principals. You can see that we've met that expectation, and we actually have now partnered with New Hanover Regional Medical Center to provide ongoing monthly trainings face-to-face, which is going to be facilitated by their staff. The next item is the implicit bias training, and we are launching that actually this month. The first training is Saturday, and you say training on a Saturday. We are partnering with an organization called Leading Equity, and for the first part of the training, there will be 20 opportunities for teachers to take advantage of that. So we have evening training online opportunities, we have Saturday online opportunities, we have them varied throughout the schedule, because we want to make sure that this is accessible to our teachers, because we believe that it's truly, truly important. Additionally, we engaged our principals in a book study despite best intentions, and this was more of a self-study on the part of our principals, and then also our work group participated in this book study as well. When the additional book study, Culturally Responsive Teaching, and the BRAIN book study is the one that we're doing with Mr. James Ford. That is a year-long book study. And as a part of that, not only are principals meeting online with him once a month, but he is also facilitating on-site 3 days in our schools. So he will facilitate either teacher focus groups or student focus groups in our middle and elementary. Well, in the high school, it will be the student focus group. In our middle and elementary, it'll be the teacher focus group, as well as observations and debriefing sessions around the work that we're doing with this particular book. And the one thing that I've heard from principals in terms of how much they appreciate this work is because it's very, very practical. This is something that is applicable to what they're doing in schools and in their classrooms. Many of you
dates on those in-county sessions, if you'd like to sit in on one of those.
Oh, could you please, let us know.
Yes, and I can share with you all the training, the online training for implicit bias. You're definitely welcome to attend that. Also, the face-to-face sessions with the hospital, we can share those dates with you as well. In regards to groundwater training, I know you guys are very familiar with that. You've heard me describe it before. Right now, we have about 160 people trained within our district and within our community based on the trainings that New Hanover County Schools has provided. We also have 2 trainings scheduled to occur on February 20th. We, again, hope to train another 160 folks within our community, and one of those trainings is actually being co-funded and sponsored by our partnership with New Hanover Regional Medical Center, and I'll say this, either through the organization or folks associated with the organization. So through New Hanover Regional Medical Center, Live Oak Bank, Be the Bridge, Community Conversations, and Cape Fear Collective, and Step Up Wilmington. And so we had a partner meeting. I sent out a follow-up survey, and these are the folks that responded. Some indicated that they could offer financial support to this. Some indicated that maybe they couldn't offer financial support, but they wanted to support the effort in other ways. And I actually have a virtual call, online call scheduled for this Friday with those folks so that we can talk about how to invite participants from their organizations who they'd like to see part of the training, because again, as you remember, our strategy is about community engagement. It's not just about the work resting within the school system, but the work being done in collaboration with the community. In addition, we
Can I ask
are,
you one question?
yes ma'am.
Okay, for the groundwater training, I had a conflict of schedule, never got to attend the second one. The second day of the training in groundwater, is it a way to send out that schedule so people like me that could only attend one day at the first time could attend the second day?
Okay.
That was actually that was the phase one training, because groundwater's one day.
No, I did 2 days. I did the one day and then you know what I'm saying.
Yes, so it is so it's not the groundwater that you're referencing, it is the phase one training, and
Because you were in the
truly,
same session as me, it was phase one.
I went through 2 sessions.
so you may have attended groundwater, but then you attended the first day of phase one, but not the second day.
Right, that's what
So-
I'm saying.
So yes, and actually, that's the next item I'm getting ready to share. So we are also sponsoring an additional phase one training
Okay.
in the district. With the first one, we were able to train, I want to say about 30 of our principals, so we want to make sure that we provide the opportunity to have all of them trained. We're also inviting our members of our Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee, as well as our work group, and then key members from our community. This is, again, a much smaller training, and the training dates are March 19th and the 20th. So if you would like to attend that second day, you are more than welcome.
Thank you.
Yes. And then also in terms of training opportunities, probably, and this is not really training, but for those folks who are phase one trained, we are engaging and continue to engage in our racial equity discussion series. And essentially, these are community conversations for folks in the community who are phase one trained. We meet monthly. Want to say a huge thank you to Cape Fear Community College for allowing us to use their space. We have different folks who are facilitating. Maria Black was supposed to facilitate this December. Unfortunately, there was a scheduling error. We're rescheduling her, but we've had Francis Williams to facilitate a session, Sean Bynum to facilitate a session. This really is a community engagement strategy. And for the meeting that's coming up on January 27th, we have Meade Van Pelt, the executive director of the Harrison Center, who will be facilitating that session. So we're extremely proud of that work. In regards to cultural competency, we've not done anything specific to that, because in talking to our experts and the consultants that we're working with, cultural competency really sits very nicely in what we're doing around implicit bias and also the work that Mr. Ford is doing. So we've not done anything in addition to that. And then also, we shared with you that we would be doing monthly principal touch points related to school improvement and of course, equity. And so we have continued with that. In September, we looked at culturally diverse literature. In October, we watched a video that was entitled The Sound of Silence. In November, the focus was on whether or not our teachers were talent scouts versus deficiency detectives. In December, we talked about the opportunity myth, and that myth assumes that students have consistent opportunities to work on grade appropriate work. Also, the myth talks around whether or not students are being engaged deeply in the learning. So there are a lot of myths around learning that exists. And so we're educating our principals to be aware of that. And then in January, the presentation, which the others have primarily been led by Ms. Jethro, is going to be talking about defensive pessimism, which essentially comes from deficit thinking. And it's a strategy that can be used with dependent learners when folks want to explain or predict their lack of achievement or outcome. So we want to make sure that we're educating our principals. So we're using every month at our principal meetings as opportunities to do that, so that they then take that back to their schools and make sure that we're responding to children in an appropriate way. Just a little bit of an update on the equity work group. The work group is continuing to to meet. We meet monthly. We have 30 members of the school staff that are a part of that group. And our current priorities right now are on our student engagement strategy. So how can we engage students in this work? The Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Board Committee, right now we're meeting most often twice a month, but in January we're just going to be meeting once. That committee consists of 18 members of school staff and the committee, and our current priorities are around policy, procedures, SMART goals and metrics, and school culture and community inclusivity. And then also, we are working now to continue to develop our partnerships. I mentioned to you our work with Step Up Wilmington, New Hanover Regional Medical Center. Also, I would be remiss in not mentioning the Bridge Church, who is actually donating their meeting space for us for our Phase 1 training as well as our groundwater training. So they are a partner with us in this work as well. Also with the EDI committee, if you will go to the board website and go under committees, each month we are posting a video summary, a video cast, and they are incredible. I have to admit, I've not done one, that's why they're incredible, but anyway. But they are incredible in capturing what's happening at our meetings. And, you know, I was just talking to Miss Eastep, and she was saying, you know, we've got to meet and talk about what we met about. I said, you've got to see the video. The video explains it so much better than I could. So there is such incredible work coming from a group of really dedicated folks around the issue of equity, diversity, and inclusion in our district. And then what we're looking as a projected scope of work for the 2020-2021 school year is creation of school teams, equity coaches to support and sustain implementation, and we're not talking about new positions, and then also looking at curriculum equity audit. And that is just a very brief summary, but I'm glad to answer any questions you might have.
Doing a good job.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Item F, exemptions from formal qualification, Appendix L. Mr. Anderson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is an annual report of exemptions to the qualification-based selection for professional services. That would include architecture, engineering, surveying. These include projects only when the professional fee for the project is estimated to be less than $50,000. We are not permitted to exempt projects where the fee is estimated to be over that. There are 6 projects that are listed for you. This is presented for information only, but I'd be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Are there any questions? No? Okay. All right, moving on to item G, change order summary report, Appendix M. Mr. Anderson?
Yes, thank you. This is an annual report of all change orders on our construction contracts. When the contracts are awarded within the North Carolina General Statutes 143-128 for formal construction and approved by the Board of Education, all of these contracts, along with the associated change orders, are within the project budgets. Again, this is presented for information only as required, but I'd be glad to answer any questions that you may have.
No questions? All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 10, superintendent's report.
All right, 3 quick things. First is 5th and 8th grade privilege. According to policy, if you move students and the number is below 5% of the total students moved, you can allow privilege. Our recent redistricting exceeds that number, so I need board permission to allow for 5th and 8th grade privilege for the students next year. That would be providing their own transportation. And it would be for that 1 year only.
How many students would that involve?
Ms. Varner?
I have that information information for you. It includes 854 students who are 5th and 8th graders, but then based on our additional privilege of sibling privilege, it could be upwards of 1,600 to 2,000 students.
Whoa.
Is it possible to approve privilege for 5th and 8th without sibling privilege?
I wouldn't.
Our general policy has been if you send one student, you allow them to send both. But what I would say is that would be a one-year privilege.
To the
And
sibling?
if you wanted to make that 1 year sibling privilege while the 5th or 8th grader maintains at the school, then that'll probably need to be noted in the approval.
Are we,
So do you all want to take this separately or together?
Do we have, can we get specific numbers?
that would be good.
854 students, but with a max of 1,500 if you include siblings.
Yeah, and I can tell you a little bit more about the 854. So 530 are elementary, or basically 5th graders. 324 are 8th graders. But I can break down a little bit more of, it won't necessarily include all of those because the parents need to request that
That's your-
privilege.
That's your top number.
Right.
Are they notified that they can request privilege?
And can you separate the 8th from the 5th graders? I mean,
You
there's a
can
big
choose to,
difference.
You can choose to do one
Is
or
it
both.
huge?
you can choose to
difference.
do one grade. Say you were only, if you think it's important for middle school and not elementary. Just, if you're gonna do one, I would suggest you
I
do
think
both,
it's-
but I'm not.
It does,
I
it
think
doesn't make
it's
sense to
important
do
for
one,
both.
not the other, yeah.
I think it's important for both. I mean, this is something we've traditionally done as a district. We've offered 8th grade privilege, we've offered 5th grade privilege. These are kids who have been with their friends. And I'm sure they can adjust, and I'm sure they're gonna be fine, and I'm equally sure they're gonna be heartbroken.
And
It's 1
life is
year.
full of that. That's what I'm trying,
Well, it's 1 year.
it's a lot of students. I'd like to see how it impacts our redistricting. How many students are we moving altogether?
So Mr. Anderson and I talked about this earlier today. We're moving we know we're moving more than 3,000 students, but maybe closer to 4,000. And this could potentially impact maybe not quite half that. But then we also have to consider that those are the ones that could apply. We also have to consider that of those numbers, of the 530 elementary, for example, we know that 76 of those students are assigned to a school under open choice, employee benefit, or employee hardship. Those generally won't change. We know that 35 of those students are McKinney-Vento status, which means they are identified as being homeless. So their status is reassessed annually. 80% of the elementary students are identified as having special education services, and some of those would not move because their service delivery is appropriate at the school that they're in.
You said 80%?
80, not 80%, 80 students of the 530. No. If it was 80%, we have another problem.
Well, it would have been an issue of some kind.
And so of the middle school, again, we've got, 48 under open choice or employee benefit, 18 McKinney-Vento, and 104 are special education students. So we've got numbers to back out, but again, we're still pulling from very recent database on how many students we're looking at. We're just saying, at most, you could be looking at 1,600 to 2,000 kids. That's a guess because we can't identify how many siblings
said at most,
these
that's half-
kids.
That's
Right.
That's half of the kids. That's half the kids we're redistricting. That's just crazy.
So,
Well,
so,
that's assuming you would go with sibling
Yeah.
privilege.
right.
Well, that's with sibling privilege.
That's assuming that every possible privilege case is requested and they all have one or two siblings. So it's highly unlikely that that's the case. But even if that many, Mr. Anderson and I were talking earlier, and we don't anticipate an overwhelming negative impact to capacity. So it's really about really meeting the parents where they're requesting the maintenance and the stability of keeping their kid their final year in elementary or their final year in middle school. And so we don't know that we don't have, and I want him to speak more about that. We don't know that there is a specific negative impact to capacity.
But these are children or families that can provide the transportation.
That is a
What about-
stipulation of the
Oh, that
privilege
would be-
request.
Transportation's
That's
not,
not
yeah, they have to provide
very
their own
fair.
transportation.
So what about those families that can't provide it?
Yeah, that's
It-
not very
and-
fair.
So there, in our student assignment plan, there's an exception, and the exception is if there's an already established bus route, and that is approved at the district level. So that's always something that can be considered, but if there's not an already established route, then that wouldn't be something that could be considered.
And some of the routes will change with all the numbers of students moving, so we won't know that for a while.
Right.
Yeah, normally the request is approved, and then once school starts, after the first couple of weeks, we would be able to determine if there's space on the bus and there's an already established route. So that would come much later.
Historically, why have we allowed the privilege? What is the benefit of the privilege? Because it's, like I said, it's been allowed.
Did we do it the last time? I don't recall that we did.
We did not do it for high school,
No.
except for
We didn't.
seniors, I think. when
But
we
I
did
mean,
that.
years ago when we,
High school's
I
a little
was,
different
that
from
was
middle.
Okay, we
before my
did-
time.
okay, it was during my time and we did not. It was redistricting and that was it. We did not honor at the elementary level. And that was what, that was
think
the
on
only
this-
one that we did.
Yeah,
did
on the
the
small,
You know-
on the small ones, I think we did, like, since I've been on the board, but they've just been the small ones.
But the major ones, we did not.
I mean, the kids are moving with their friends. A lot of their friends are moving with them. This is.
Which
this is-
should mitigate the impact and should mitigate the requests then, I would
The
think.
neighborhood's going.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, the purpose of redistricting is you redistrict, and when you start chipping away at all these different, and then you have the privilege part
It'll
too,
be
it
ended,
just gets very confused, you know.
it'll end next year. It's 1 year. Kids have been with their friends since 5th grade. If they want to stay at that school with the teachers and staff that have nurtured them, I just feel like that's a request. And I know it's not fair. Everybody should be able to do that. I wish that were the case. But
All of
I
our
don't want to
schools
hurt
are
the kids who want
good
to go. in the name of
schools
principle.
and nurture
It's
their
not, it's not the schools, and I don't disagree with you. It's
Oh, I
the
know about the
relationships that you develop, it's the teams that you're on, it's the after-school activities that you're involved with.
I
And those
agree.
become so huge to a student. I mean, for me, I would support that 1 year, so they can finish out their school career at the elementary and middle, but,
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that, but I think the sibling privilege is going to create
Correct.
more numbers than we can accommodate.
Right.
So you could
That's
approve
one
it
step
just
to
for the
get
student
crazy.
and not for the sibling.
That's an impossible ask for the families.
No, it's not.
It's a single year. And again, you've said we don't anticipate any major negative
I would
drawback.
suggest if you have a parent and if you have a kid in high school and middle school, you're dealing with a similar situation when your kids are going to two different
Right.
schools.
Yeah, and, you know, I love children. We need to treat children practically. This coddling, I hate to say this, but kids move schools. A lot of them have no choice. Their families have no choice. And it actually gives them an opportunity to meet new people, make new relationships. And when I said that our schools are good with nurturing, that is just as valid as the fact that they develop relationships. So it's 50-50 to me, one or the other. They're both good options, but it's good too to move
I
and
can
meet
tell you,
people
I don't
and to learn that
disagree.
you can adjust and change as a part of life.
I don't disagree in the macro
Okay.
sense. In the micro sense, I can tell you, and you know, that 8th grade especially is a time of
Eighth
great
grade's more
emotional
concerning to me.
turmoil,
Right.
and you're gonna have some serious,
I said 8th grade's more concerning because it is much different than elementary. So that to me would be something we could talk about, but
I
5th
also
grade is a whole different matter.
I also think that is, if we can make it a parental decision about whether or not they are coddling or not coddling, that would be
I didn't
great,
say
rather than
coddling.
our decision to say, these children are being coddled.
We're not preparing them for the real world, is what my concern is.
my concern is the mental health of the kids and the
The
emotional
mental
health
health
of
can
the
be
kids.
enhanced by moving to other schools. It's 50-50.
Especially the 8th grade students.
The 8th grade students I care about. That makes sense because I've taught in all these different grades, and that is a particularly changed time for your development with all the different brain changes and the, hormones, the whole thing.
They're getting older.
So that is something definitely to look at, because they are more insecure at that age, and they're about to go to high school.
So is there a motion on the floor? Is someone going to make a motion?
Well, let's just start with the 8th grade and
Okay.
vote on that, and then we'll keep
So,
looking at. I move that we allow privileges for the 8th grade, rising 8th grade students to remain at their school for, I hope, just 1 year.
Okay, yeah, that one's much more practical, and I can see why from working with different age levels.
is there a second?
Second.
Okay,
What about siblings?
well, let's get
One at a
this
time.
first,
One at
and
a
then
time
we'll,
first,
yeah, then we'll work on that one. We'll chip away. So there's a motion and a second to allow 8th grade privilege. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It is approved. Let's work on 5th grade privilege. And then we'll conquer the sibling request.
Tell us again, Ms. Varnum, that 5th grade numbers.
Yes, ma'am. Our 5th grade numbers are 530 rising 5th grade students have been redistricted. I have the numbers by school. We do not have an idea right now on the number of siblings for those. But of those 530, we've got roughly 185 that fall into either open choice, employee benefit, McKinney-Vento, or special education.
It's down to 300, so just starting to add
All
up.
right,
So, Mr. Anderson, those remaining students, are they dispersed enough that it's not going to impact any particular school?
I haven't looked at that number broken down per school, but I can tell you just based on the overall percentages, I don't see a problem with what this would do is essentially phase in redistricting over 2 years. And I think what we've outlaid is an absolute worst case scenario. I think the actual numbers would be far less. So I wouldn't anticipate a problem at all.
all right, so is there a motion to approve 5th grade privilege? Is
Move to approve?
there a second?
Excuse me.
I will second.
Okay, discussion time.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
No, we need discussion.
Oh, we thought we discussed, but okay, let's
Can you
discuss some
put
more.
that
Well, I'm
bag-
cons-
Can you put that bag down, please, Dr.
This one?
Markley, so I can
No.
see?
I'm concerned, I'm
Now I
very
can
concerned
see
about the
her
kids that have parents that can drive them and the kids that can't. I mean, is that fair? And honestly, part of life is having the opportunity to have change and to learn positives from it. So, to me, the 8th grade, there's a lot more, having worked with kids, now this is my professional opinion, and those of you that have worked with kids know what I'm talking about. The 8th grade's more of a, I guess you could say, difficult time. 5th grade, they're much more malleable, and it's actually, they're going to be going with their peers anyway because of the neighborhoods when we're moving them, and they're going to be going to middle school next year anyway with their friends, and they'll be making the friends that they'll be going to middle school with when they move into the 5th grade to their new school. So to me, it's not near as the same issue as the 8th grades.
Well, you're asking them to move and then to move again the next year.
They're all going to anyway, go to middle school, at least
You're
they'll be
asking
with their
them to double up
friends.
and do it twice.
They're gonna have to make their new friends in the 6th grade or the 5th grade, might as well do it in the 5th.
Any further discussion?
I would point out again that Mr. Anderson has noted this does not really affect our redistricting. And I agree with you, Ms. Jessup, it is not fair. It is absolutely not fair that
Thank
not
you.
everybody can do it. But I don't want to hurt some kids out of a principle.
Now, why are you saying this is hurting them?
Well, I think it
That's your
depends.
assumption. I've worked with many kids, and I don't feel that, this is as many pluses as negatives
I
in either
get the
direction.
same emails you do. So I'm sure you've seen that some people are very concerned about their rising 5th grader.
They are concerned, and I'm concerned about them too. I'm saying they're gonna be moving to 6th grade, and they're gonna be going to middle school. The new 5th grade they're moving with the kids, a lot of them with the kids from their neighborhoods, and then they're gonna be making new friends, and the same friends they'll be moving to middle school with. So I'm not sure that it's such a tragic thing for this age group. In fact, I see the 50-50. I think it's just as good as it's bad. That's my take on it.
Well, based on what Mr. Anderson has told us, if we don't do sibling privileges, I don't have a problem with the fifth graders remaining.
That's how I feel.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of fifth grade privilege, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Opposed?
Right. All right, moving on to sibling privilege. Sibling privilege for eighth grade. Discussion? You want to do that first? Any discussion on that?
The difference between middle school and elementary school, over the course of elementary school, you've got 6 years span. So you're going to have multiple siblings. It's possible to have siblings that are greater, further away from each other. At the middle school level, you could potentially have a 7th and 8th grader going into school, so they're gonna have to make that decision the next year anyway. I don't know. I don't,
What you're potentially doing is creating a double privilege for a seventh grader because of a sibling, who
Right.
then becomes an eighth grader who's allowed to finish out the year.
right.
Yep.
But given the volatility of the age, and there will be fewer siblings
At the middle.
that close, and, so given that, I just feel like it's the right thing to do.
Oh, really? Well, why are we redistricting?
I don't know, it's hard to say sibling privilege for one and not the other, though.
No,
That's not gonna, I don't
Wait,
think
why
that's
are we-
gonna fly.
be very
We're
confusing.
talking about, now we're getting into numbers that could be scary, and also, here we go again with the word privilege. I like that. Certain people are going to be able to do this very easily. They can get in the car line with everybody else, but how about the kids that can't?
I agree. I can't fix those problems. If I could, I
Oh,
would.
then, yes, you can, in a sense. Why are we doing something that's going to negate the redistricting that you said you worked so hard on?
Is there a motion to approve sibling privilege for eighth grade?
Move.
Is there a second? I will second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
No,
Opposed.
Opposed?
All right. So it's 2-3. Sibling privilege for fifth grade?
Move for approval.
we approved the fifth grade,
The sibling privilege we did.
not sibling, I didn't
Yeah.
hear that, I'm sorry.
Yep, sibling privilege.
Okay.
I will second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
No.
Opposed.
All right, 2-3. Okay. So you've got fifth and eighth grade privilege for the students only, not siblings.
All right, that'll go out when we send out the reassignment letters at the end of the month. That'll be we'll include those as part of the sibling letter. Part of the enrollment letter. Two other things from the superintendent report. We instituted a bus change at Holly Shelter, a 15-minute time change. And so far, the feedback on that has been very positive. Mr. Anderson, anything you want to add?
Sorry. I'm thinking about the kids. I had a child who missed a bus because he hadn't remembered. That's his fault, not yours.
We, we have been monitoring the buses very closely. This doesn't prevent a late bus. It enhances our ability to respond to that. And we had 8 drivers out in Northern Division last Friday. We were actually able to take the first 2 buses that returned to Trask, send them to Holly Shelter, and split that final route, which got those students home a lot earlier. So it's definitely working, and we're taking advantage of it. Thank you.
Yeah, Trask has one of the more compacted districts, so they're usually finish up their routes faster. All right, I'm happy to report CTEC has actually had its first graduate. Student who is moving to Singapore and finished up this semester, Jordan Murphy, and his degree was in sports management, along with his high school diploma.
Awesome.
That concludes the superintendent's report.
All right, thank you. Board chairperson's report, you have 10 minutes, but I don't have anything on there, so it's actually 0 minutes. Item 12, committee reports. Item A, Family Communications Committee, Ms. Adams.
I am not going to use 15 minutes either. I just would like to note, the Family Communications Committee has had 2 roundtable discussions over the past 4 months. And the first one was new to New Hanover County Schools, so families that were new to the district, whether it was new as a kindergartner or middle school or high school or just moved new to the area. The second roundtable discussion was for multicultural language families. For both of those roundtable discussions, we had over 30 participants from the community come. We had students, we had parents, we had aunts and uncles, and it was really great discussion. And so the purpose of these roundtables are to hear from the students that are being served and their families within our community. How do we improve? How do we get better? Are you getting the information that you need? So I just wanted to say a big thank you. We've got 14 members of the Family Communications Committee that represent the district as well, from all walks of life. And that's been having our parents and family members from the community has been super helpful too, because they bring some insights that I think sometimes inside the system we don't see. So to hear it from them directly in the meetings has been fantastic, as well as the family members that have come in for the roundtables. Big thanks to Ms. Clegg and Ms. Adams. They have handled the logistical pieces for the roundtables, and they are fabulous. And just thank you to all the families that have attended. We've gotten some really great insights, and we look forward to doing more of these. We hold them every other month. So this month will be a Family Communications Committee meeting, but we will have another roundtable discussion in February. So that's it.
All right, thank you. I would like to add, and it's not on the agenda, but I spoke with Mr. Jarrell Lewis, who has taken over the Title IX, assumed the Title IX position, and is leading that committee. And the next meeting was supposed to be on the 20th, which is a holiday. And so we talked, and he wants to we agreed that we could hopefully move the meeting to the 21st. So that hasn't been officially announced because he couldn't get a hold of Ms. Bowie, but Ms. Adams, if you could take care of that, that would be great. It would be 3:30 right here in the Board of Ed Center, as long as the room is not already reserved. So that is the tentative date and tentative time. If that needs to be updated, we will certainly update everyone. Item 13, consensus items. Item A, personnel, Appendix N, Dr. Welmers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I ask the board to approve the personnel matters as presented.
Move for approval.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It is approved. Item 14, old business. Item A, immersion at Porter's Neck Elementary School, Appendix E. Dr. Smith?
Yes, I'm going to be presenting an item for the board's approval for the partnership agreement for an expansion of immersion at Porter's Neck. But prior to that, we do have Ms. Jethro, who's going to talk to you and share information in regards to the timeline for implementation. As you all know, Ms. Jethro is also the Director for Elementary Education for the district. Typically, this would be the role of the principal, but in lieu of that position being filled, Dr. Jethro is taking the lead with Porter's Neck.
Thank you. So to start the process and the timeline with Porter's Neck Elementary School, we are going to announce the opening of the Mandarin Immersion Program, and really we would like to have the interest of at least 2 kindergarten classes with 25 children each. so that we are able to start that program strong. I have been on the phone this week, as a matter of fact, with Participate to talk to them about what is next, and so this is how we are going to proceed. And since this was prepared for you in time for the due date for you all to receive your board materials, we actually have even more information. Session 1, in terms of a parent information session, is actually going to be on January 29th, and we're going to hold that at College Park Elementary School because of its central location, but it still mirrors that design of Porter's Neck. We're going to host information session number 2 actually at Porter's Neck Elementary School, and that is going to be on February the 13th. And both of those will be from 5:30 to 7 p.m., and I'll definitely share that information with Ms. Adams. So I will facilitate that. Participate is willing to join us and share information. I've also spoken to Ms. Lampley as the principal of Gregory, because if parents have specific questions about how the kindergartners at Gregory adjusted to having a program like that, she would certainly be able to speak to that as well. And then to move forward with selecting a principal. If by perhaps February at the board meeting, a principal would be able to be recommended, then maybe we could look toward March, and I would work with them and transition this information over to them, and they could pick up the next steps. But still, as an elementary school, I'm very excited about being able to work with them and accomplish.
Position has been posted. Anticipate typical 10-day posting, and then we would interview 3rd or 4th week in January, 1st and 2nd rounds to bring you a name in February. The state will fund the principal position for a brand new school in March so that they can have time to plan and get the school up and running.
When would we have to sign a contract with Participate?
So what we're asking for tonight is the signing of the service agreement, so that obligates us to a commitment for Mandarin immersion at Porter's Neck. That then allows for them to come and support us in providing us with support in determining our curriculum materials, also hosting our recruitment. They've got a recruitment toolkit that they use, and then their services in building capacity around this. And so they've done some preliminary work, but as an organization, they work with a multitude of school districts, and so they can only support so many programs across the state. And so by agreeing to the service contract, then that obligates them to support a program expansion here in New Hanover County. Yes, ma'am.
Well, are there other groups that do this? Is this the only
So there,
organization that works with immersion programs? Or?
so there are other groups that do this. Participate, based on my knowledge and understanding, is probably the more established in North Carolina. They have a they have a proven track record with us here in New Hanover. They have a proven track record across the state. There are, my experience in talking with other organizations that do this work, typically they're folks who have at some point worked for Participate, which used to be known as VIF. They then break off and create their own organization. But if we want to go and have support from someone who has proven themselves in this industry, then this would be the leading vendor for this type of service in the state.
I'd like to apologize because up to this point, I had not really been that focused on the Mandarin program at Porter's Neck, but I have received emails and calls from parents and concerned citizens over the last couple of weeks, and I did not realize that that it is of a concern because of its location at Porter's Neck, that there are schools very much like Gregory, not the only ones, that could benefit from a magnet program that could possibly help with some of the issues we're having with the high poverty levels in those schools. Porter's Neck does not have that issue at all. When it does finally open, it's not going to have even a free and reduced lunch probably of 30%, from what we've even talked about tonight. So, the opportunities for magnet programs, just like it is at Gregory, should be used wisely and to help the district as a whole. So at this point, I know that you have talked about Porter's Neck. In fact, we've planned on Porter's Neck. But would it be impractical to maybe step back a little and look at other school locations, possibly place this program that would be very useful in bringing in higher income parents into schools that are struggling with doing that? Because Porter's Neck does not have that issue whatsoever and won't have that issue.
No, in fact, it actually has, one of the reasons to put it in Porter's Neck is to attract just the opposite of what's there. I'm afraid if I put it in a school near Gregory, then I'm going to detract from the program that's at Gregory.
What about Sunset Park?
Again, location-wise, that's pretty close to Gregory, and my concern is if I put a program there, am I going to take students out of Gregory, which is already an established program? By putting it up at Porter's Neck and providing transportation to those students, I'm trying to find a way to deal with some of those. We talk about getting students to go to those schools to help with some of the issues. If it's not free and reduced lunch, here's a way to open up a program to folks outside of the Porter's Neck district and with that school.
Well, I don't know how much that's going to have an impact on the students that need to be exposed to these opportunities. They're, needless to say, it'd be most likely the students up there and students whose parents are not so tied down with daily challenges that will be able to do that with their kids. Is it going to be transportation? Do they have to provide their own transportation?
No, we'll provide
busing?
transportation.
Okay.
And for example, CTEC. We have a student who actually comes from Carolina Beach all the way to CTEC every day.
Well,
And I can share that we
Okay.
did have some additional conversations with other schools about immersion, not specifically Mandarin. And part of the concerns were if you started at an existing school, you will actually have to displace teachers and students. And that was a really hard lesson that we learned with Gregory. And even though we worked through attrition, we did displace kindergarten teachers at Gregory. And so by beginning at a new school, then this becomes a part of the culture of that school. And different from Gregory, you would have the non-immersion track as well as the immersion track. So we did consider, and again, not specifically Mandarin, but additional immersion programs, but there were concerns about displacing students and then also displacing teachers and employees as well.
what about preferences? Is there some way that we can build in a preference for these more challenged students?
Yeah, we can wait a lottery. I mean, we wait lotteries now for our 2-year
And also
rounds.
go to the schools themselves, in the neighborhoods, like was done in Forest Hills originally when it was, but this, outside the controversial part, the part where we went out and actually recruited people.
And that is one of the other reasons about signing the agreement now, if, if possible, because I believe this is the third time that we've had some discussion at the board level in regards to it. But with that, then we would have the resources of Participate to help us move into the community so that we could begin to actively recruit, very intentionally recruit. I surely could see us connecting with Howe and Johnson and having those early conversations with those families about the opportunities that learning a second language would provide to their children.
And the other thing with immersion classes are exempt from class size restrictions. So if you look at Gregory, we recruit, we want 80 kids a year to come into Gregory as a kindergarten class. And that's 20 kids per class. Well, we actually had more than 80 last year. And so we averaged 22 in the class. And class size restrictions for non-immersion classes is capped at 18. It's a hard cap at 18.
So you can do that with the
Yeah,
20.
and then also with Gregory, even, if we had gone with class size caps, we would have had a waiting list of 16. And then also, Principal Lampley shared with me that after the school year started, she had even more families approach her. So, we intentionally try to mitigate the waiting list because we understand how incredible an opportunity this is for children. And so if parents want it for their child, if we can accommodate, we try to, and be as inclusive and actually avoid the lottery.
Honestly, that's what I'm concerned about, is the inclusiveness. of
Can I
it.
ask a curricular question?
Yes.
Or curriculum question? I noticed when you were going through the first slide that this is gonna be a 90-10 model, and that's originally what Gregory started as, and it's changed.
So learning Mandarin is very different
Yes.
than learning Spanish.
Okay,
So
It is.
that's why I just, yeah.
Yeah, so most programs are either 90-10 or 85-15.
Okay.
And then they continue throughout, and then what happens in second grade is you actually bring on an English ELA period. So they'll still get Mandarin, they'll still get ELA in Mandarin, but then they'll also get ELA in English. And again, that's one of the benefits of working with an organization that has done this successfully in a lot of different places, because they've done the research. We're planning school visits, and for our school visits, we want to bring parents who are interested, parents who are skeptical, parents who never thought that this would be, something that they might consider for their children. And so they have access to schools in Cumberland County and other places that are doing this, and we have access to those principals. And so, it helps us to implement this effectively from year one, as opposed to kind of finding our way along the way.
So what's the middle school plan then?
Good point.
Well, I would love to be able to initiate the kindergarten plan, but I mean.
I'm thinking long
It's
term.
actually-
But yeah,
It's a
so
great
wait,
question.
so
Yeah.
what I can say is
Wilson.
it surely could dovetail into two of our high
Could it go to
schools.
Greg- well, could it
So-
go to
so
Gregory?
I'm gonna completely skip middle school, how about that? So it definitely could dovetail into two of our high schools,
Yeah.
because we do have,
Holly trees. are
Mandarin
creators.
at New Hampshire.
we've got our program at Hoggard with the IB that has a track for Mandarin, and then we have what we're doing at New Hanover High School. Now, that, of course, would have to change tremendously to be responsive to these children. But I surely could see these children either matriculating back to to Gregory, and we could make that middle school program much, much more robust. Because right now, it's not immersion, it is language acquisition. But because those children have come through immersion, when they get to the high school, they are fluent in Mandarin just after 3 years of language instruction. But there's also the consideration for a middle school program. And I think we are wide open as a district in terms of where that could be.
It was neat at Gregory because the Mandarin at Gregory was kind of it was an organic process because the parents had we knew we were gonna build out the K-8. And so we initially went in there thinking it was gonna be K-8 Spanish all the way. But those parents, when they got there, said, my kid's kind of burnt out on Spanish and would like a different language.
Yeah.
So that's when we brought in the Mandarin piece, and that was an outgrowth of the parents at the school and what they did. And to be honest, it was not something we originally thought, but it's been a great success.
Well, and I'll also say that our Williston students, not our Gregory students, but our Williston students who have been able to take advantage of Mandarin have really enjoyed that. But as Gregory continues to build, it's going to eliminate those opportunities. So we surely could look at expanding possibly, language acquisition still being at Gregory, but immersion being at Williston. And I don't want to start any rumors
Well,
about Williston.
all I'm saying, if
but
I'm a parent,
but yes.
I'm gonna ask that question.
Well, what I would say in response is, if you commit to kindergarten by the time your child's in 3rd grade, I will provide to you a very well-articulated program, because it helps us to see what our numbers are, what our attrition is, and how sustainable it is.
Okay, that's
So,
fair.
I have some of the same concerns as Ms. Justice. I don't, and it's not the site per se, it's that I honestly haven't been convinced that Mandarin is something that we need, not immersion in general. And I'm not saying no. I'm saying I really haven't been convinced, and with 2 of our board members out, with some of the concerns I have about the viability, the continued viability of the program at Williston and Gregory. I would ask to table this until we have a full board. I think we're moving very fast. I understand the desire to do it. I just haven't been convinced that Mandarin is the right fit for New Hanover County. It's
What
not
I-
an international language.
What I would say is, I believe that if we table it, then that eliminates our opportunities to do anything in terms of engaging parents in the conversation prior to that recruitment window. If this was something that we wanted to do this year.
Start from the
And so
start
then, if we did it the
yeah.
following year, then we would find ourselves displacing folks. So again, you know, we were
And-
very
and I would say
intentional
in terms of
in
the
bringing, I'm sorry.
In terms of the timeliness issue, this is not a new issue. This is something that that we've talked about. It's been on multiple board agendas, and it's an idea that I've floated out there well over a year ago. This is probably one of the longest running thoughts that we've had in terms of knowing this was coming. So this is not something that's a new issue per se.
Yeah, and
It's not a
that's
new
why I said I
issue, but-
apologize for just having it, but this was brought to me by parents.
Right.
It's not a new issue, but I know I've addressed the concern that knowing whether or not we actually have the interest in those and knowing that we have the numbers for those class sizes, you and I have spoken about that. And one of the continuing concerns I've heard voiced, speaking about the IB program, is the numbers inside the program are much less than the numbers outside the program, because you have attrition, you have kids that say they're going to sign up and then don't. And so there's a resource inequity. And I don't want to see that develop here. If we're signing a contract for $50,000 before we know we actually have the interest. And I am concerned about that. I get the timeline, but now we're up against the timeline, and we're being asked to sign this before we know we have any interest whatsoever. So we're committing to it. So I'm concerned about that. And then I want to make sure that we also answer the questions that have been raised by the Gregory parents, that they are concerned that it seems like maybe resources are going to be, they are perhaps siphoned from Gregory, or questions not addressed by Gregory. So I want to reassure them, but I also want to make sure that we are going to be able to fill those classes. If we're going to commit to this, we got to have the students.
Well, yeah, I guess, could you clarify how did the decision come to Mandarin?
Well, we already have a Spanish program, and so don't want to compete with what we're offering at Gregory, because it is building into a very successful program. And so I don't want a language that's going to compete with them. So I wanted a language that was different, but a language also that has value to somebody who has that skill. When you think about the world at large, what's the most spoken language in the world? And it's Mandarin, Chinese. And in terms of business and the ability to give a student a skill that's going to give them a leg up, Mandarin and Spanish are the two languages that do that, and that's the two.
And then also thinking about sustainability across the state, there are other successful programs across the state. And then also the success that we've seen in our existing Mandarin services at Gregory as well. So those were definitely factors to help inform the decision that went into selecting this specific language. So we surely could have looked at Farsis or other languages, but those resources and that sustainability just is not as established in North Carolina. So we would be definitely a little more on the cutting edge, and we would be really treading new ground if we were to choose one of those existing programs. But I mean, we surely could have looked at French, we could have looked at Italian, but again, those programs have not been evidenced in the work that I've done, the schools that I've visited across the state. So that's, again, what helped us to inform and land on Mandarin.
What about interest, though? You're right. How much interest is there? We don't, how do we know? I just want, I mean, if you're using Gregory as an example, it's almost like apples and oranges, since this is such a different language in a different location. I would hate to be using resources when we have so much need in our district already in other areas. I mean, it's valid.
I think all of your concerns and questions are valid. Again, you know, we're not going to be able to, well, backing up just a little bit, thinking about Gregory, you know, if you were a part of those conversations, a part of those meetings, whether, you know, you were on the board or community or just folks sharing their concerns and you know, comments with you, the turning point really for Gregory, from my perspective, was when we were able to take some of the folks who had the greatest concerns, who were going to be most impacted by what was happening in terms of the transition from Forest Hills to Gregory with immersion, to schools in Fayetteville. So where parents could see children that looked like their children, speaking Spanish, interacting in a classroom where that was the only language that they spoke, that was really a turning point. So what I would say is, in being able to really answer the question about interest, it's going to be really hard to do until we're able to connect with families and start doing some of these site visits, bringing some of the resources to the district so that we can engage them in this conversation in a very informed way.
So,
yes.
I agree with the rationale for Mandarin. I know that it is a business language. I think it's going to be very helpful. I think, though, this is the cart before the horse, because you don't know what the Porter's Neck parents are going to feel about this.
Or the district in general.
I mean, I think it's a great language. I think it's a great option, but we have no idea how they're going to feel about this option. That's my only concern, that this is a little backwards.
I think it's very valid.
And really, we have so much need in other areas in this district. If it doesn't start off very successful, and we have put all this energy and money and resources into it, that's not going to help our situation within the future if we've got something that will be more, you know, that you can tell will be practical and will work, being able to convince people. So I'm very mixed about this.
Dr. Markle, normally we don't vote on anything at a work session, but because we are missing 2 board members who may have comments or concerns or need more, could we table this for it and add it to our work session agenda? Get more information that you didn't have a chance to give to us because of the time.
Maybe a phone survey between now and then?
And then
And
you
a
could do
practical one,
survey.
one that's
Some
realistic.
email survey, phone survey from the parents that are gonna be there next year, you know.
Something.
And just to the general district, would you be interested for, well, I guess we don't have our,
Well, you won't want, part of doing this is to get beyond just the established districts, so we'll have to survey beyond that.
And I think maybe some idea on how to address the concerns at Gregory, just to reassure the parents there that this will not take away from what is going on in their schools.
Well, and I've spoken with the principal, and I know she spoke specifically with one parent, and I also spoke with that one parent, and that's the only parent that I've heard from
Well,
directly.
a couple, so.
Yeah.
But you know, our intention is not to take any resources from Gregory in order to support this.
And I would tell you, I'm an advocate of teaching languages to as many of our students as possible.
Absolutely, as young as possible.
And as soon
All
as
students.
possible. I would personally love an immersion program in every school.
Well, it's not
but
even
that's,
immersion. See, and that's another thing that these resources could be used for, because up to a couple years ago, the state of North Carolina, for good reason, because of all the studies that show, students can learn languages so much, once you're 12 or 13, your brain wiring changes. And we were doing that. The state was even paying for the Spanish teachers and it was Spanish was the language. And we, you know, the state cut it, and we haven't, but we could be using possibly resources to give kids opportunities to have exposure to it and learn some of those. So at a good age. So, you know, doing this with a handful of kids as opposed to district-wide using those resources, to me, those resources would, you know, I'm looking at hitting as many kids as possible, giving them opportunities.
All right, so it sounds like we have decided to table the vote to the work session. Is that what I'm hearing, the consensus? Okay, all right. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. You've
Oh,
done work, I
most
know
welcome.
that.
Moving on to new business, item A, Microsoft enrollment for education solutions, Appendix O. Ms. Brinson?
Yes, requested the board approve the Microsoft enrollment for education solution, formerly known as EES subscription. It is a 3-year subscription. This year, the cost is $217,057.18. We basically pay on a full-time equivalent employee, so that number does fluctuate over the 3 years, but not by much.
Is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It is approved. Item B, amendment to the application for Public School Building Capital Fund, North Carolina Educational Lottery, and CTEC High School Phase 3 Innovations, Appendix P. Mr. Anderson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The lottery applications for the 2019-20 fiscal year were approved by the board this past August, and they included Phase 3 renovations at CTEC High School. Since then, we've been able to complete Phase 1 and Phase 2, and we've realized a total savings of $265,000, little over $265,000. What we would like to do is take that savings from the previous CTEC phases, roll them into this current Phase 3. There were some things that, due to the construction market and the volatility and just the unknown cost, that we did not take and did not include in those phases to make sure that our construction bids came in under budget and that our schedule wasn't affected. This would allow us to add those back into the project in this third phase. So we ask for your approval tonight of this revised lottery application. If the board approves this, we will then carry it forward to the county commissioners in the state.
Okay, thank you. Is there a motion to approve Appendix P?
Move for approval?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It is approved. Item C, Laney High School Closed Circuit Cooler, Appendix Q. Mr. Anderson?
Thank you. This project's also funded in the education lottery, or through the education lottery, and included in the 2019-20 capital budget. It's to add an additional cooling tower at Laney High School. Bids were received on December 17th, and the project is within budget. We recommend tonight award of the contract for construction to Harrelson Mechanical Contractors in the amount of $532,600.
All right, is there a motion to approve Appendix Q?
So moved.
There's a, all right, there's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? It is approved. Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Item D, surplus, Appendix R, Ms. Small.
Thank you. I request the board's approval to dispose of surplus property no longer necessary or desirable for public school purposes, to be disposed of in accordance with public school law, and if approved, the auction has been scheduled for January 25th at 10 o'clock.
Is there a motion to approve item D, Appendix R?
So moved.
Approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It is approved. Thank you, Ms. Small. Moving on to item E, Sexual Abuse and Sex Trafficking Training Program, Appendix U. Ms. Varnum and Mr. Bullard.
Madam Chair, I'd like to give the background on this, if I may.
Sure.
The North Carolina legislature enacted a statute in November called an Act to Protect Children from Sexual Abuse and to Strengthen and Modernize Sexual Assault Laws. And it made several changes to the laws, but one of the things was it mandated that LEAs adopt a training program for sexual trafficking and sexual abuse awareness among students. The Student Support Services Division had already picked out a program called Darkness to Light, which Ms. Varnum is going to talk about in a minute. But the statute did require the board to approve the training program. And because the training program could change, right now I believe we're getting it for free, but it's possible that may not continue forever, and we may have to end up purchasing a similar program from a vendor. I'm asking that the board delegate to the superintendent the authority to select the vendor that complies with the requirements of the statute. So the request is to the board is to approve a motion as follows: for the board to authorize the superintendent to adopt and implement a child sexual abuse and sexual trafficking training program that includes all of the components required by Statute 115C-375.20. The training program will include best practices from the field of prevention, the grooming process of sexual predators, warning signs of sexual abuse and sex trafficking, how to intervene when sexual abuse or sex trafficking is suspected or disclosed, legal responsibilities for reporting sexual abuse or sex trafficking, and available resources for assistance. And at this time, I'll let Ms. Varnum describe the program that was selected called Darkness to Light.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bullard, and thank you, Madam Chair and board members. Once we get it going. So much of this information was just shared in the request for approval, but basically the training program on child sexual abuse and sex trafficking per Session Law 2019-245 is asking, as Mr. Bullard shared, for the name of the product or the type of product or the type of training that we'll be completing. And we actually began, we had formal training in October, but we actually began having training of our staff in August of 2019. So we're ahead of the legislation, but we need to definitely name the source we're using. As Mr. Bullard said, the training program per session law has to require all of these pieces, and you have all this information. You also have a full-page flyer of the Stewards of Children document in your packet, but then also linked here in the Darkness to Light Stewards of Children link, there's a quick video, a 1:40 video that's just really an overview. We can show it if you're interested. You can look at it at your leisure, however you want to do that. It really doesn't get into the details, but it gives a little bit of commentary on why it's something that's meaningful to not only school staff, but anybody that works with kids. To date, we have nearly 400 staff that have already been trained in Darkness to Light, including all of our principals, our assistant principals, all of our fall athletic coaches have been trained, and we are set to train our next phase, our next season of coaches. In addition, all of our counselors and social workers are being trained on February 21st. So. And one of the trainers that we use in the district, of course, is our own lead counselor, Tanya Jordan. And she participates with the Carousel Center. As we know, a Carousel Center is a highly beneficial and highly utilized resource community agency in our community that works with children who have been sexually abused or sexually offended. And they don't just provide the resources for the family, the child and the family, they provide resources to the community. And we work very closely with them. The delivery methods for the training can certainly be the face-to-face, which is what our nearly 400 staff have experienced, has been the face-to-face with Carousel Center staff and with Tanya Jordan. There are other options that we identified along the way. I think Darkness to Light, or Stewards of Children, is the specific training, has realized that there's a lot of interest in their materials, and so they have created online modules. So I went ahead and purchased the bulk for myself to go through all of their training series, and I really wanted to see if I could endorse, the online self-paced modules, and they're really good. I had my director, Kristen Jackson, the director for student support, go through that with me, and she's gone through the face-to-face, and we did kind of a pro-con of having the self-paced online modules versus the face-to-face training. We found they were both highly beneficial, and they could both meet a different staff need, based on scheduling and that kind of thing. The key steps that are emphasized in the program are teaching our staff, which wouldn't just be classroom teachers. It would be instructional assistants, it would be bus drivers, it would be cafeteria staff, anybody that works directly with children, which is really kind of hard in the school system to find people that don't work directly with children. Because if you interact with kids on a daily basis in the office or through custodial services, you work with kids. Learning the facts, minimizing opportunities for sexual abuse or trafficking, really learning how to talk about it, without re-traumatizing, recognizing signs, and then being able to react responsibly. So these areas, like I've mentioned, these areas with our community partners, we've already found those beneficial, and then with the legislation, we know that it's meaningful just to continue the quality program that we're using. So with local trainers, so we've already invested in having one of our own staff trained in the program. The cost of the training is limited to $10 per participant, and it's to pay for the cost of the manual. But then our partnership with the Carousel Center allows us to have these manuals provided at no cost to us, because they have received grants or completed fundraising for that. In the future, it's a lot of excitement. In the future, we have already reached out to the Department of Public Instruction, because part of the alert of the legislation said that the Department of Public Instruction would give us some type of list or resource list. So we quickly were communicating with them and saying, okay, wait a minute, we're using this. Is this something you plan on putting on your list, Stewards of Children? And they said, well, we're not actually going to create a list. We're going to give you resources to help you find your tool. And then they said, but it's great that you're using Stewards of Children, and in fact, the North Carolina School Training Center at ECU has purchased thousands of online licenses because they had grant money that was going to run out, and so I think it's first come, first serve. Go get them. So, of course, we jumped right on that, too. So we are asking for as many online licenses that the North Carolina School Health Training Center will provide to us. And knowing that having the North Carolina School Health Training Center purchasing thousands, I think they purchased like 16,000 of these online licenses, we know it's a good product. We felt that, but we actually know it now. But then to ensure that the funds are available, because this is a legislated demand, we will be including any possible costs in the budget process soon. And that's it. Do you have any questions?
I just want to say that, just give a shout out to Amy Fief and the Carousel Center, because the reason that some of this started, like the partnership started, was through some of the conversations at the Title IX committee. Amy and Tanya Jordan got together, and that's where this kind of organically started, was that those conversations in that committee, and so they, Amy and the Carousel Center offered to partner with New Hanover County Schools, and so all this began, and I appreciate all the work that was done to get this going, and the training started, and so yeah, it's been great.
They are a huge benefit to our community, absolutely. And the work Amy does with, just the collaboration with all of our partners in student support, but also in every individual school, it's beyond amazing.
Second. Yeah, she's fantastic.
All right, so we need a motion to approve item E.
Move for approval?
Second?
All right. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It is approved.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 17, is that right? Correspondence. Is there any correspondence that any board member would like to share?
Just a quick update on census. April 1st is Census Day. I met with Dr. Markley. We talked about doing a Connect 5 call or perhaps two leading up to Census Day. And, maybe doing something, or exploring doing something with stickers, home for kids or something, or a census project in class. But anything we can do as a board or as a school system to raise awareness of this very, very important issue. And you're talking about $1,700 per person in federal aid based off of the census. And it's really important to our community. And we found one of the best ways to engage the community is through the kids. They take something home, and there is usually some sort of substantial reaction from parents, especially in areas where we expect low participation. And the census actually provides us with data about where those will be.
Thank you. Item 18, announcements. The next regular meeting of the New Hanover County Board of Education will be held on Tuesday, February 4th, 2020 at 5:30 p.m. in the Board of Ed Center. And that's the only announcement. So we move on to closed session. Is there a motion to go into closed session pursuant to Mr. Bullard?
The statute is going to be regarding personnel, which is 143-318.11A6. And I guess also attorney-client privilege, which would be subsection 3.
So moved.
Second.
All right. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nope. We are in closed session.